Hi, and welcome to another book talk about books available to you through your Jackson Hinds library system. My name is James Hampton. I'm a professional assistant here at the Medgar Library in Jackson, Mississippi. And last book talk, we talked about biographies. Now, biographies are books about a real person's real life. But today, let's take a break from reality and talk about fiction. There are lots of types of fiction: historical, romance, thrillers, crime fiction, all types of fiction that people enjoy. But often overlooked is the short fiction. So today I want to talk about short stories. Short stories are different from your novels because they're only about 10 to 30 pages long. So you have short story collections that are novel length, but within that book, there will be 10 to 12 short stories. And short stories are great because you can read them in maybe about 30 minutes. The point of a short story is to be able to read it in one sitting, and it should have so much punch that it'll be like reading a novel. So it'll stick with you for the rest of the day, or maybe the rest of the week, or maybe your whole life if it's really good. So I want to promote short fiction today by talking about one of our newest collections. It's called How to Love a Jamaican by Alexia Arthurs. And she's a new writer on the scene. This is her first book, and it's a collection of short stories. She's from Jamaica, raised in Jamaica, spent part of her adolescence in New York, and also educated in the Midwest. So the stories are set in all these different places, and they're a really diverse set of characters and really fun and interesting to read. What drew me to this book in the first place was the chance to read some of the Jamaican patois. And if you don't know, patois is the language that Jamaicans speak. If you've heard Jamaicans speak, they speak English, but at some point, if they're with each other or in certain situations, you may hear Jamaicans speaking, it sounds like a completely different language. That's patois. Linguists call it Jamaican Creole, but it's English-based with African roots, and it's very interesting. I learned a new slang word from Jamaica. It's called slack. So if a Jamaican calls you slack, then it means you might be lazy or morally loose, or even lacking in common decorum. So try not to be slack. I learned a phrase when I read in the middle of the book. I read a phrase that said, "Make you never tell me say your little sister can run." That's an interesting phrase. As soon as I read it, I said, "Oh, I finally understand this word "mek" that I've been hearing in all this reggae and dancehall music." And so I looked it up on the internet and found out how they use the word "make." And it's not just make; it's all kinds of different uses for it. So you can get your patois learning on. There's all types of things you can learn from fiction, even though it's made up. Just because it's not real doesn't mean it's not true. So you can learn a lot from fiction. And that line actually came from a story in the book called "The Ghost of Gia Yi," and it's about a young lady who got a track scholarship. She grew up in Jamaica, but she got a track scholarship to go to school in Iowa, and it's all about her struggles as a college student in Iowa. And one of her fellow international students got murdered and found in the trunk of her car, and she felt she was getting haunted by the girl's ghost, or as a Jamaican might call it, a duppy. And so it's a good story, and there are all kind of great stories in this book and diverse characters. There's a story about a young boy who grew up in Jamaica with his grandmother, and his whole life he was waiting for his mother to send for him because she lived in New York, and she finally did send for him. So the whole story is him in New York, reminiscing about his island life with his grandmother. And he's actually an albino, so that's an extra interesting part of his life. And all the characters are like that. They're diverse in gender, in age, in background. There's a story that's actually the title story. It's called How to Love a Jamaican, and it's about an older couple that met in New York. They're both from Jamaica, but they met in New York and they got married. They had 2 daughters, and they lived most of their lives, adult lives, in New York. But after they retired, they moved back to Jamaica, and it's a very loving couple, a sweet story. The wife is a breast cancer survivor, but the husband has a secret. He got a 16-year-old son outside the marriage that she doesn't even know about. So it touches on that's the nature of the stories. The stories have all of these modern issues that they touch on, and it's very interesting. And which reminds me of another story. Probably the last story in the book was called Shirley from a Small Place. It's about a pop star on the international level, Grammy Award winning, and it talks about her life, but she's actually from Jamaica, and it goes into her childhood and talks about her. It goes back and forth from her life as an international pop star to her childhood in Jamaica, and it's also very interesting. So if you can think of any pop stars that are from a small Caribbean island, then you might know who this story might be based on. It was a great book. I enjoyed it a lot. I got a lot of language skills from the book, and I just want to promote this book itself and all the short fiction in our collection. There are a lot of classic authors that we have books by in terms of short fiction. There's James Joyce and D.H. Lawrence, and Zora Neale Hurston has a new collection of short stories out. You may say, oh, Zora Neale Hurston, that's a classic author, but they found some of her old short stories and they released it in a new collection. So Edgar Allan Poe, you can always count on for a good spooky tale this time of year. So those are classic authors. Some of my favorite modern authors that write short stories. Walter Mosley has a new collection of short stories. Octavia Butler, rest in peace, she's got great short stories. Joyce Carol Oates is a great writer of short stories. A lot of people like her novels, but they don't know that she shines as bright as anything when she writes short stories. So check out our short stories. Keep those in mind. Thank you for your attention and happy reading.